Boldwood presents One Summer in Monte Carlo, written by Jennifer Bohnet and read by Julia Franklin. The moral right of the author has been asserted. This performance is owned by Boldwood. Chapter 1. Nanette, this has been the perfect day. I'm so glad you agreed to be our wedding planner. You've done an amazing job. As for this place, Vanessa gestured around. It doesn't get any more romantic than this. Ralph and I can't thank you enough for finding it. And Vanessa hugged her friend tightly. The two of them were standing in the grand entrance hall of Diamond Park Hotel, the 18th century manor house that a far-seeing local hotelier had bought and turned into the most aspirational wedding venue in South Devon. Once the home of a local aristocrat, the house stood at the end of a drive lined with tall silver birch trees. Today, though, their branches were bare of the silvery leaves which rustled in summer like tinkling water. The private chapel, set in the middle of a snowdrop-covered field, with views tumbling down the Devonshire countryside towards the distant River Dart, sparkling in the late afternoon winter sunshine, had proved to be an ideal venue for Vanessa and Ralph's winter wedding. Nanette smiled at her friend and employer. I must admit to being worried about organising your big day. It's been such a long time since I've done anything like it. She paused. I did wonder whether I was still up to it. You did a great job, no question about it, Vanessa said. You're a beautiful bride, Nanette answered. Right, enough of this mutual admiration society. I need to talk to you, urgently. Nanette looked at her, anxiously. Can't it wait until you return? You're only away for the weekend. Incidentally, you have to leave in about 10 minutes, Nanette said, glancing at her watch. Surely, Ralph must be wondering where his new wife is. He knows I'm with you. It's important for me to talk to you before we leave. I have to ask you something. Vanessa glanced at Nanette. You know that Ralph has got this big filming project lined up in the Amazon. He was telling me it's his biggest project yet, Nanette said, remembering how enthusiastic Ralph had been earlier. He's really passionate about this film, isn't he? He wants me to go with him. We'd have a week's belated honeymoon in Brazil, and then I'd become part of his team filming the documentary in the rainforest. For the whole of the 5 months? Nanette looked at her friend, wide-eyed. Personally, she couldn't get her head around the prospect of spending such a long time in a rainforest, away from civilization. Vanessa nodded. How do you feel about being away for so long? What about the twins and your business? Oh! This, as realization dawned. You want me to step into your shoes while you're away? Nanette took a deep breath. Looking after the twins, fine, I'm used to that, but running the business? I don't think I could do that. Nanette shook her head. Organising today with the help of your office is one thing. Running your business in your absence would be totally different. Vanessa ran a highly successful PR business, with clients ranging between official government bodies, small businesses, and the media. Nanette looked at Vanessa anxiously. You know, I haven't done any office work since... She shrugged and didn't finish the sentence. I did think, after organising today, I'd ask you if I could come in and do a regular stint in the office to help me get back into the swing of things, but being in charge... No, I don't want you to run the business, Vanessa interrupted. Caroline's more than happy to look after that side of things for me. She's been taking on more responsibility recently anyway. But I do want you to carry on looking after Pierre and Olivia for me. Nanette gave her a relieved smile. Of course, I'll look after the twins while you're away, no problem. But 5 months is a long time. What happens if there's an emergency? Do I have full responsibility? What about Mathieu? Nanette couldn't help but think about Mathieu, the twins' father. Surely he should be the one taking care of the 9-year-old twins while their mother was away. There was a pause as Vanessa fiddled with the sprays of freesias pinned to her wedding dress, before she sighed and looked directly at Nanette. I know it's a huge ask, but I need you to look after the twins in Monaco. Vanessa held her hands up in a conciliatory gesture as Nanette looked at her aghast. I know, you vowed never to go back, and I promised you wouldn't have to. She hesitated before continuing. Mathieu has agreed to have the twins live with him for 6 months, provided you go too, and look after them like you do here for me. He says he's too busy to become a schoolgate dad. Nanette turned away and watched silently as an all-enveloping mist began to rise from the river and drift up towards the chapel and the hotel. The afternoon was turning cold as the last rays of sunlight vanished. Damp air began to swirl around them as the reassuring presence of the old chapel became an eerie outline as the mist swallowed it up. Nanette tried, unsuccessfully, to suppress a shivery shudder of apprehension at the very thought of returning to Monaco. Painful memories of the place she'd pushed into the darkest recess of her mind began to swirl into her consciousness. Can't Mathieu come over here? She said, turning back to face Vanessa. I'll willingly look after the twins here. Vanessa shook her head. Apparently not. He says it's impossible for him to leave the country for so long right now. He's got some sort of business deal going through and needs to be there. Vanessa placed an arm around Nanette's shoulders. I realise I'm asking a lot. I know how difficult it'll be for you to even think about returning, and if you can't face it, I will understand. So will Ralph, Vanessa said. But please, will you consider the idea, while Ralph and I are away this weekend? Nanette sighed. Okay, I promise I'll think about it. I'll even run the idea past Patsy and see what her reaction is. But I'm 99% certain it'll be the same as mine. A big fat no way. After the happy couple left for their weekend on Berg Island, staying at the iconic Art Deco hotel situated there, Nanette scooped the twins into a waiting taxi and headed off to the station to catch the train to Totnes, where the three of them were spending the weekend with Patsy, her older sister. With only 10 months between them, and both inheriting their mother's dark auburn hair and brown eyes, they were invariably taken to be twins themselves. Sibling rivalry was something that simply didn't exist in their world, and they'd been inseparable growing up. Later, separated by their choice of degree courses, art history for Patsy and business administration for Nanette, they'd still talked daily via Skype and quickly signed up to WhatsApp. Patsy had used her degree to obtain a job with the National Trust and had worked as a curator for them in several of their properties. Nanette, who loved to travel, had soon found herself working in the high-octane world of Formula One motor racing, to the delight of her father, who had loved the sport. When their parents died in a boating accident 7 years ago, Patsy and Nanette had consoled each other and become even closer if that were possible. After Patsy met and married Brian, a Devonshire farmer, and settled into her role of farmer's wife like a born countrywoman, she'd insisted that Nanette regarded Blackberry Farm as their family home. Until you get married, of course, and have your own home. But that had never happened. As the train sped through the Devonshire countryside, with the twins both playing games on their iPads, Nanette gazed unseeingly out of the window, deep in thought. One question, and one question only, kept running through her mind. Dare she return to a place that still haunted her dreams? Going back to Monaco would open up old wounds, remind her of what she had lost. Vanessa would surely understand if she told her there was no way she could return. They'd met on the very first day of the business administration course they'd both signed up for, and struck up an instant and lasting friendship. They'd been through a lot since they'd known each other. Job hunting, Vanessa's marriage, the birth of the twins, the divorce from Mathieu, and now her wedding to Ralph. Not to mention Nanette's own major life trauma that Vanessa had helped her survive. Patsy was Nanette's sister and best friend, but Vanessa had become more than a close second. Nanette was happy with her life the way it was these days, although, if she was honest with herself, she was living an easy life, a half-life, in truth. She was safe and secure, doing a job with people she loved, but with little excitement. So different to the one she'd worked hard for when she was younger, before it had been cruelly snatched away from her 3 years ago. Pierre and Olivia were 9 now, and soon wouldn't need her constant presence in their lives. But mentally, she'd consigned her need to decide about her future until they were older. Vanessa's request today, though, had set her mind racing, and her thoughts spinning out of control. Nanette sighed. She'd talk to Patsy about it, see if she thought going back was a possibility or even a good idea. Patsy was standing waiting for them on the platform as Nanette shepherded Pierre and Olivia off the train. "Hi! Everything go according to plan?" "Good. You look like a princess in that frock, Olivia. Did you enjoy being your mum's bridesmaid?" "Of course you did, silly question. And you, Pierre, how are you doing? You look very smart in that posh jacket." "The car's parked right outside. We should be home in 15 minutes. I expect you're looking forward to your supper, or did you fill up on wedding goodies?" Simply listening to her, Nanette felt breathless. She was always amazed at the speed at which Patsy spoke, and sometimes found it difficult to get a word in, let alone answer any questions. "It was a lovely wedding. Such a shame you couldn't be there. Vanessa sends her love. How are you? Any news?" "I think you've put on weight since I last saw you," Nanette said quickly, when Patsy finally took a breath. "I'm fine. My news can wait until later. Talking of weight, you could do with putting on some. You're scrawnier than ever," Patsy said, with sisterly bluntness. "I hope you're eating properly, or has organising the wedding stressed you out?" Briefly, Nanette wondered what Patsy's news was likely to be as she answered her sister, "I'm fine." She glanced across at her sister as the twins ran ahead to the car. "I need to run something past you later. Need your advice." Patsy gave her a quick, concerned look. As they reached the car and she unlocked it, the twins clambered in and did up their seatbelts. "Okay." She was really looking forward to this weekend break. She probably was stressed, she realised. Life recently had been busier than she'd become accustomed to for the past 3 years, and she was tired after all the excitement of planning and organising the wedding. The twins always enjoyed themselves on the occasions she looked after them on the weekends Vanessa had to travel for business, and she brought them down here. They'd disappear for hours at a time, exploring the woods and surrounding fields and helping Brian around the farm, while she and Patsy did sisterly things. 15 minutes later, Nanette sighed happily as they turned onto the farm lane. "How's Brian's mum? Enjoying her new home?" Nanette asked as they passed a pristine bungalow at the top of the farm track. "Think so, but you know Helen. Drove Brian mad for the first week or 2, wanting shelves put up and cupboards moved. But she's finally got it as she wants, although the kitchen will never be right. It's far too small. And of course, she'll never like living there as much as she enjoyed the farmhouse, even though she moaned for years it was too big and drafty. She'll be joining us for lunch on Sunday as usual, so you're sure to hear all about the drawbacks of having to live in a modern bungalow." Patsy smiled at her sister. Once the twins had been fed and settled in their rooms, and Brian was in the study working on the farm accounts. Together, Nanette and Patsy went into the sitting room to make themselves comfortable for a sisterly chat. "Glass of wine to toast a happy couple?" Nanette asked, holding out the bottle of champagne Vanessa had insisted she take. "A small glass," Patsy said. "I shouldn't really, but I don't suppose a sip will hurt Junior. Auntie?" She grinned mischievously at Nanette. "Oh, congratulations!" Nanette said, jumping up to hug her sister. "That's your news! I'm going to be an auntie! You and Brian must be so thrilled. I know you both long for a family. When's it due?" She quickly pushed away the tiny shaft of jealousy that pierced her heart. Her time would come, wouldn't it? "Late July, early August. No definite date yet, but knowing my luck, it'll be right in the middle of haymaking. Can you be here? I really, really want you around. Helen's already threatening to move back to help out. Promise me you'll tell Vanessa you need to be here. You can bring the twins." Patsy looked anxiously at Nanette. "I'll be here," Nanette promised, even if Vanessa is still paddling a canoe up the Amazon. "Vanessa's going up the Amazon?" For once, Patsy seemed speechless. "Yep." And Nanette told her sister about Ralph's wish to make his new wife part of his film team. Patsy took it for granted that Nanette would be looking after the twins whilst Vanessa was away. "The three of you will be able to come down regularly. Oh, I'm really beginning to look forward to the next few months." Nanette shook her head. Perfect time to tell Patsy about Vanessa's request. "Afraid not, Patsy. Mathieu has agreed to have the twins to live with him in Monaco while Vanessa's away." She took a sip of champagne before adding quietly, "The only condition is that I have to go with them." Patsy's eyes widened in incredulity. "You're not serious. I know it's nearly 3 years ago, and you've supposedly recovered from all the trauma, but are you sure you're strong enough mentally to face things out there? You're bound to meet up with certain people. Certain situations are going to bring back painful memories." Nanette nodded. She also knew how village-like the Principality was, with its own drumbeat of gossip sweeping down the well-heeled streets. "I know. My first reaction when Vanessa mentioned it this afternoon was no, no, no." Nanette swirled the wine in her glass, thoughtfully. "Vanessa's been so good to me. I owe her so much. I'd feel as though I'd let her down if I don't agree. I know she desperately wants to go with Ralph." "I'm sure she'll understand if you say you can't do it, though," Patsy said. "Surely Mathieu could find someone local to help look after the twins for a few hours each day after school. Doesn't his father, what's his name, Jean-Claude, live nearby? I'm sure he'd be delighted to have some bonding time with his grandchildren. Personally, I don't think you need to go at all." Nanette was silent for some seconds before looking at her sister. "I was thinking, coming here on the train, that maybe I do need to go. Return to the scene of the crime, as it were. Being airlifted out so quickly left a lot of questions that in my mind have never been answered. There were also a lot of people I didn't get to say goodbye to." "Not many of them have been in touch with you since, though, have they?" Patsy demanded. "Not even he, whose name shall not be mentioned, unless I'm blaspheming, despite insisting he was acting in your best interest at the time." Nanette flinched. Perhaps by going, I can finally close that particular chapter of my life and begin to look to my future. I can't be Vanessa's housekeeper-cum-childminder forever. The twins are growing up, she said quietly. Patsy shook her head. "Oh, Nanette, if you feel like that, I don't know what to say or suggest. I just don't want you being hurt again. I'm afraid you'll find going back a lot harder than you expect. Could you cope with any recriminations that might occur? If you do go and things get too difficult, promise me you'll come straight back here, with the twins, if necessary." "Where else would I go?" Nanette said quietly. The thing is, what do I do if I don't agree to take the twins to Monaco? I was so shocked I didn't think to ask Vanessa what would happen if I said no. What if I refuse, and the twins go to Monaco anyway? Where does that leave me? My job and my home will have disappeared. I'll have to find somewhere else. Oh, come on, Nanette. Vanessa's always treated you as part of her family. That's not likely to change, Patsy said. She'll probably offer to find you a job in the office. She's certainly not going to throw you out on the street. I guess you're right, Nanette sighed, looking at her sister. Are you all right? You look a bit pale, she asked, concerned. Patsy put down her virtually untouched glass of champagne. Excuse me. Don't know why it's called morning sickness. Mine comes morning, noon, and night. And she disappeared in the direction of the bathroom. Back in a mo! An ashen Patsy reappeared a few minutes later. If you don't mind, I'm going to go to bed. We'll talk more tomorrow. Chapter 2. Nanette followed her sister up the stairs, deciding to have an early night herself. Unpacking the suitcase in her familiar bedroom, tucked away in the eaves of the farmhouse, she remembered the week she'd spent here with Patsy, mothering and fussing around her after the accident. An accident that she herself remembered little about. All she could recall was the physical and mental pain she'd suffered on the flight back from Monaco, when both her body and her successful career lay in tatters. Her dreams of marriage and a family were all shattered too. Vanessa had visited several times. On one visit, a couple of months after the accident, she'd arrived with a proposition. "You're looking better than the last time I saw you," she'd said. Considering I was still black and blue and various bits of me were swathed in bandages, that's not so hard, Nanette had smiled. How are the twins? Your business? Pierre and Olivia are fine, and the business is really taking off, Vanessa had replied. Mathieu has taken them to Disneyland for a few days. He was a lousy husband, but I have to give him credit, he does try to be a good father. I just wish he hadn't decided to live in Monaco permanently. It makes access a bit complicated. She glanced across at Nanette. Have you made any plans for your future yet? Nanette shook her head. No. I'm trying to find the courage to face the world again, but I just don't know where to start. My body has been battered and broken. I don't have a job, and my savings are rapidly disappearing. So, do I get fit before I start to look for a job to get back on my feet? Or do I stay here with Patsy and Brian and try to find work locally? Or what? She looked helplessly at Vanessa. On top of it all, I feel such a fool. Hey, you're not a fool. You were holding down a very busy and stressful job when the accident happened. If Zac Ewart had an ounce of decency in him, he'd have supported you, made sure you had a job to go back to, not dumped you before the case came to court. Honestly, Nanette, I can't believe he behaved as he did. Talk about putting the boot in when you were down. You were engaged, for goodness sake. He should have stood by you. Nanette had bitten her lip as she'd listened to her friend and vainly tried to stop the tears flowing down her cheeks. It was what she'd expected to happen too. Instead, she hadn't heard from her erstwhile fiancé since she left Monaco. Although she had seen the headlines about the accident, calling him a hero and her a reckless driver. Vanessa, instantly contrite, had put her arms around her friend. Nanette, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. It's just I get so mad on your behalf. There'd been a pause before she'd continued. How do you feel about moving to Bristol and coming to work for me? Nanette had looked at her in surprise. You need a PA for the business. Vanessa shook her head. No, Caroline's doing a great job. What I need is a housekeeper and someone to help with the twins. I know it's not what you trained for, but Maybe a complete change for a while would be good. I have a very busy few months coming up, and I need someone at home I can trust to look after the twins and generally take care of things." "You're not offering me a job out of pity?" Nanette had asked. "Definitely not. I'm trying to juggle home and work, and I'm desperate for some help. Being a single mum's difficult enough without trying to start and keep a business afloat. I need you, Nanette." "What happens about getting the twins to Monaco to visit Mathieu? I couldn't face taking them there. I can't do the school run, either, now I've lost my licence," Nanette had added quietly. "Mathieu will have to collect them. We'll sort something out so you don't have to go. As for the school run, we're only 10 minutes away. Much better for them to walk, anyway. I can't pay you a fortune, but you'll have your own room, you'll keep, although you'll be in charge of the cooking. I thought it'd help us both. You, to get back on your feet and recover from recent events, and me, because I'll have someone I can trust utterly, while I concentrate on this business and make it work." "Maybe we could try it for a couple of months. See how things work out?" Nanette had said, thoughtfully. "I have to warn you, though, I'm not a brilliant cook." "Great," Vanessa had said. "School starts next week. So, how do you feel about coming back with me tomorrow? You can settle in and have a few days to organise a routine." Patsy had fussed over her like a mother hen for the next 24 hours, worried that she wasn't ready to leave the sanctuary of the farm. But pleased there was to be some purpose in her life again. The couple of months' trial had gone quickly, and Nanette, finding she enjoyed a domestic working environment more than she thought possible, had happily agreed to stay on permanently. It was certainly less stressful than her previous job as a PA to a Grand Prix racing driver. She adored looking after the twins and running the house, especially when Vanessa was away on one of her frequent business trips. It was like having her own home and children, something she'd always wanted, had imagined having by now, if only things had turned out differently. Mathieu visited frequently, much to the twins' delight. Separated and divorced when the children were still tiny, he and Vanessa had managed to remain friends despite their differences, and both did their best for the twins. Pierre and Olivia were now so used to the way their lives were divided between both their parents and England and Monaco, they simply accepted it as the way their particular family worked. Things had, of course, changed when Vanessa met Ralph 18 months ago. But everyone had been careful to make sure the twins were happy and knew they were loved by both their parents. Today's marriage ceremony would serve to cement their own happy nuclear family. Nanette loved the three of them and was already very fond of Ralph. He and Vanessa were so right for each other. The sudden switching on of an outside light, flashing a beam into the room, brought Nanette out of her reminiscing and back to the present. She glanced out of the window to see Brian, the happy father-to-be, on his way across the farmyard to do his final nighttime check of the animals in the barn. Earlier, the twins had helped him fill the hay racks, and now, as Brian opened the barn door, Nanette caught a whiff of the hay and the ascetic smell of contented cows chewing the cud. Thoughtfully, Nanette drew the curtains and went to finish her unpacking. Could she really turn her back on everything Vanessa had done for her and refuse to help out? Besides, if she didn't agree to take the twins to Monaco, where would that leave her? Patsy, she knew, would welcome her with open arms if she decided to move in and live on the farm permanently with her and Brian. But soon they would be their own little family unit, and she dreaded the thought of morphing into the aged spinster aunt who just existed without a proper life of her own. Patsy was right when she said Vanessa treated her like family, but relatives had fallen out over less, and Nanette dreaded the thought of losing contact with Vanessa and the twins, simply because she refused to go to Monaco and face up to her past. Nanette sighed. It was such a big, unexpected decision to have to take, and so little time in which to consider all the options, to get her thoughts in order and to make the right decision. She could only hope a good night's sleep would help clear her mind, and in the morning she'd be nearer to having the answer. If she managed to sleep at all, that was. Chapter 3. The smell of freshly percolating coffee greeted Nanette as she made her way down to the large kitchen on Sunday morning. Patsy was busy pushing sprigs of rosemary and cloves of garlic into a large leg of lamb, ready to roast for lunch. "Hi, did you sleep well? The twins are helping Brian feed the baby calves. Help yourself to coffee. You know where the cereals are. There's plenty of bread for toast. Can you pass me the pot of honey, please? I want to drizzle some over the lamb. I'd offer you bacon and eggs, but I can't stand the smell of bacon cooking at the moment." "Coffee and toast would be just fine. I'll do the vegetables for lunch afterwards, shall I?" Nanette asked, as she handed her sister the honey. "Thanks. Helen always insists on bringing the dessert, so I don't have to worry," she says. "More like she doesn't like my pastry. I thought we could go for a walk after lunch, maybe take the twins down to the lake. Helen always likes Brian to take her on a tour of the farm on Sunday afternoons, like they used to when Albert was alive." Patsy sighed. "Honestly, Nanette, sometimes I could strangle the woman, but she does mean well, I suppose. I thought when she finally moved out, things would be better. She'd get an independent life again, leave Brian and me to our own devices a bit more." Patsy shook her head. "Nothing's really changed. She's still up here every day on some pretense or other, and Sunday lunch here every week has become something of a ritual set in stone. Not sure how I'm going to deal with all the grandmotherly advice that is sure to be heaped on me. That's why I need you here as an ally when Junior arrives." Patsy glanced at her sister. "Any closer to deciding what you're going to do about Vanessa's request?" Nanette shook her head. "Still mulling it over. Maybe the walk this afternoon will clear my head and I'll be able to think straight." She certainly hoped so. As she'd expected, sleep had evaded her for most of last night, and she tossed and turned for hours, trying to reach a decision without success. Helen arrived just as Patsy placed the roast in the Aga and immediately queried whether it would be cooked in time. "I always had the meat in the range by 10 o'clock at the latest, ready for lunch at 1 on the dot. Still, you young things abhor routines, don't you? Mind you, once the baby arrives, you'll soon change your tune." "Helen, it's lovely to see you again," Nanette said quickly, before Patsy could respond to her mother-in-law's criticisms. "How's life in your new home?" She couldn't decide whether Helen's prickly nature had got worse since she'd handed over the farmhouse to Brian and Patsy, or whether the woman had always been so prickly. "Different to what I've been used to, but I'm settling in nicely, thank you. Once Brian finishes off a couple more little jobs, I'll be really organised, ready to devote my time to helping Patsy with the new addition." Helen slanted a look at Nanette. "How about you? Your memory completely back to normal now?" she asked briskly. "I saw a picture in one of the Sunday papers recently of, what's his name? Your ex-fiancé, anyway. Had a blonde on his arm. Said something about him being newly single again and playing the field. Zachary, that's his name?" "I saw that photo too," Nanette said quietly. "As for my memory, I still have no recollection of certain things people tell me happened 3 years ago. Maybe it's for the best," she added, forcing a smile in Helen's direction. "Otherwise I'm fine. If you'll excuse me, I'll just go check on the twins." Leaving the kitchen, Nanette mouthed an apologetic, "Sorry, I'll see you later," at Patsy, before closing the kitchen door behind her. After a slightly strained lunch, Nanette, Patsy and the twins went for their planned walk down to the lake at the far end of the farm, with the twins running ahead. "I'm sorry Helen assumed your memory had returned to normal," Patsy said, quietly, "and mentioned you-know-who. I know you find both difficult to handle." Nanette shook her head wearily. "Don't worry. I wish my memory of that evening would return, but I'm beginning to believe it never will now. As for Zac, well, I can't hide from news about him forever." Opening a heavy farm gate so that Patsy didn't have to climb over as the twins had done, Nanette said to her sister, "Actually, I think Helen's comments have helped me make up my mind. I can't run from the past forever, so—" She took a deep breath. "I'm going to tell Vanessa yes. I will go to Monaco. At least Mathieu will be around if there are any problems with the twins. And he'll be a friend for me, too." That night, though, the nightmares that had taunted Nanette for months, years after the accident, returned with a vengeance. Nanette could feel the wind tearing at her face as she frantically skied faster and faster down the mountainside. Adrenaline flowed through her veins as she heard the noise of the avalanche behind her gathering speed, devouring everything in its way. Her lungs forced a terror-stricken scream into the air. She couldn't die like this. "Nanette! Nanette, wake up! You're having one of your nightmares!" Patsy shook her gently. A shudder went through Nanette's body as she came to. "Here, have a sip." Patsy handed her a glass of water. "What was it this time? Another monster breaking into the house? An earthquake?" Nanette shook her head. "No. I was caught up in an avalanche." She took a sip of the water as Patsy regarded her thoughtfully. "It's been ages since you've had a nightmare." Nanette nodded. "I know. I was hoping they'd finally finished," she said, her body still racked with shakes. "The therapist was saying only last month that it was a good sign I'd gone for so long without one. Wonder what interpretation she'll put on tonight's little episode," Nanette added through chattering teeth. "It was horrible." "The stress of planning the wedding? Or maybe the thought of returning to Monaco?" Patsy said, giving her sister a concerned glance. "Are you cold? Shall I get you a hot water bottle?" "No, thanks. I'll snuggle back under the duvet in a moment and I'll soon warm up." Nanette smiled at her sister. "You go back to bed. Remember your condition. Don't want you with dark circles under your eyes tomorrow. Or rather, today." She glanced at the bedside clock. "I'm sorry I woke you." "If you're sure you're okay," Patsy said. "I could stay with you for a bit." "I'm fine. Go back to bed," Nanette ordered. "I'll leave the light on for a bit." Patsy glanced anxiously at her before leaving and pulling the door closed behind her. Once she was alone, Nanette sat on the edge of the bed and took some deep breaths, trying to get her shaking body under control. It was never easy to banish the apprehension and terror that the nightmares brought. Sitting there, watching a moth seemingly mesmerized by the bedside light, flying frantically round and round, Nanette's thoughts flitted about in a similar manner over her latest nightmare. These terrifying dreams had been an irregular part of her nights for nearly 3 years now, ever since the car accident in which she and Zac Ewart had nearly died. The therapist, whom Patsy had persuaded her to see when the nightmares began in the weeks after the accident, had been right when she'd said they would happen less and less as time went on. Tonight's nightmare, though, had been truly terrifying, as bad as any she'd ever had. Slowly, as she sat there, the shaking stopped, and the feeling of devastation retreated into her subconscious. There had been an extra dimension to the nightmare tonight, something that had lingered as she'd woken up. as she'd hurtled down that slope in the path of the avalanche, screaming in terror. She hadn't been alone. A shadowy figure had been alongside, urging her on. "Faster, faster, remember, remember." Remember what? Despondently, Nanette replayed the nightmare in her mind, trying to come up with some positive memory from the episode. But her brain refused to cooperate. Wearily, she slipped under the duvet and reached out to turn off the bedside light. Hopefully, the rest of the night would pass peacefully. Now the decision was made, and she was going to return to Monaco. She would need all her strength to get through the memories the coming weeks and months were sure to throw at her. She could only pray that she was making the right decision for her, but, in truth, what else could she do? Chapter 4. Returning to Vanessa's with the twins after their weekend stay at Blackberry Farm, Nanette caught up with the usual chores that were involved with looking after Pierre and Olivia. Vanessa and Ralph returned late the same day, with Vanessa shooting an anxious, enquiring look at Nanette. Nanette smiled at her and nodded before saying, "We need to talk about it." But it wasn't until the evening of the following day that she had the opportunity to talk properly to both Vanessa and Ralph. The three of them were having a late supper around the kitchen table, and Vanessa was saying how much she'd enjoyed their weekend on Berg Island. The hotel was wonderful, so luxurious, and its spa treatment room sheer bliss. Vanessa sighed happily. "I haven't ever been spoilt in quite the same way, even in Monaco. Something I could get used to, I warn you." Vanessa smiled at Ralph, who gave her an amused glance. "I think the Amazon jungle will soon bring you back down to earth," Ralph said. "Ah," Nanette said, pushing her supper plate away and picking up her still half-full glass of red wine. "About that." She took a mouthful before placing the glass back down on the table and looking at Vanessa. "First, are you still certain Mathieu and Jean-Claude can't manage without me being there?" "Mathieu is adamant that he's got too much on over the next few months for him to guarantee being available on a day-to-day basis. Jean-Claude, I know, will step in and help, but he's busy with his business too. And honestly, I'd feel so much happier if you were looking after them while we're away. You're such a constant in their lives already, and I trust you to put them first whatever the circumstances." Nanette took a deep breath. "For you and the twins, I will go with them to Monaco and look after them. I can't say I truly relish the idea of returning there, but—" And she gave a resigned shrug. Vanessa was on her feet and rushed round to hug Nanette. Thank you. I know it's been a difficult decision for you. I promise you, Jean-Claude will do everything to make your stay as easy as possible, even if Mathieu is away on business a lot," Vanessa said. "I can't thank you enough for agreeing." "Neither can I," Ralph quietly added his thanks to Vanessa's. "A toast, I think. To Nanette, for Monaco, and to us, for the Amazon." Nanette smiled her acknowledgement of the toast as they all clinked glasses. Inwardly, though, she was terrified and fighting an overwhelming urge to shout out, "I was joking! I didn't mean it! I can't possibly go back to Monaco!" And she definitely didn't have an answer to the other major, panic-stricken thought going round and round in her mind. What have I done? After a couple of weeks of frenzied preparations, Vanessa and Ralph departed for Brazil, leaving Nanette with no option but to fly to France with the twins. As the plane lost height in preparation for landing at Nice Côte d'Azur Airport, Nanette caught a glimpse of the famous giant pyramids complex on the Baie des Anges in Villeneuve-Loubet. Built to resemble waves, standing 70 meters high above sea level, the apartment blocks overlooked a marina and the Mediterranean Sea. A sight that so many times in the past she'd been happy to see as she'd returned to Monaco after being away working. Today, though, she didn't feel the happiness, just a flood of unwelcome memories. By the time the plane touched down some minutes later and taxied along the landing strip that ran alongside the edge of the sea, Nanette had taken several deep breaths. For better, for worse, she was back in the south of France. The Mediterranean sparkled under a warm March sun, and she remembered how, in the past, returning had felt like coming home, and she'd always felt content to be back. Not today, though. Today, she was a bundle of apprehension, wondering what she'd be forced to confront in the coming days and weeks. Whatever the next few months had in store for her, she prayed that the turbulence of her past wouldn't intrude into the future. She undid her seatbelt and began to gather their things. The twins were already on their feet, excited at the prospect of the next part of the journey. Normally, transfer to Monaco for them was via tram from the airport, and then a train from Nice. But, as a special treat, Vanessa had arranged a helicopter flight for the three of them. Walking through the arrivals hall, Nanette put on her large sunglasses. She knew from experience that there was always the odd photographer or even a group of paparazzi lurking around the airport, in the hope of snapping someone famous on their way out to the helicopter pad for transfer to Monaco. She knew she was unlikely to be of any interest, but hiding her eyes and obscuring her face behind the dark glasses made her feel better. It wasn't the paparazzi who greeted her, though, as she walked towards the helicopter check-in desk. It was a large billboard advertising the Monaco Grand Prix in May. But it was the smaller poster, featuring a film star-style close-up of the man regarded as the local hero with the words, "Is this Zac's year?" emblazoned over it, that took her breath away. Seeing Zac's familiar face smiling out at her made Nanette want to do the impossible. Run, and catch the next flight back to the UK and safety. Impossible, though. She'd given Vanessa and Ralph her word. She just had to spend one summer in Monte Carlo as she'd agreed, and then she need never return again. Turning her back on the poster and trying to shut the images and the memories it invoked out of her mind, Nanette handed over the flight reservation tickets to the desk clerk. "Great," Pierre said excitedly. "We'll be here for the Grand Prix. Do you think Dad will be able to get us some passes for the pit lane?" "I shouldn't be surprised," Nanette said, with a sinking feeling. She'd totally forgotten their time in Monaco would clash with the race. That a certain person would obviously be in town. Pierre, being a typical boy, would naturally be fascinated by the racing cars and their drivers, and would want to go out and about at race weekend to see as much as possible. "Well, I don't want to pass," Olivia said. "I hate the noise those cars make. It hurts my ears." Inwardly, Nanette agreed with Olivia. Not because of the noise, but the last thing she wanted, too, was a ticket to anything that involved contact with Zac Ewart. Maybe Mathieu would be around at Grand Prix time and would take Pierre down to the pit lane, while she and Olivia stayed well away. The twins clambered happily into their seats in the helicopter, leaving Nanette to sit alongside the pilot. As the turbines screamed and the rotors beat the air, the helicopter took off in a rush of noise, and Nanette took several deep, steadying breaths. The pilot glanced at her sympathetically. "First helicopter trip, you look a bit nervous. It's only 15 minutes. Nanette shook her head. "No, it's not my first trip, but I am nervous." Staring out through the window at the coastline that had once been so familiar to her, Nanette didn't add that it wasn't the flight she was nervous about, but the fact that she was returning to Monaco. After landing at the helipad in Fontvieille, a downtown extension of Monaco, which had been built on land reclaimed from the sea, Nanette and the twins took a taxi to Mathieu's apartment on the Boulevard Albert Ier, overlooking the old port. As the taxi took them through one of the many tunnels that made their way, mole-like, under the Principality's roads, Nanette remembered how surprised she'd been the first time she'd arrived by the existence of this underground road system, hewn out of the rocks that lined the walls. She'd never suspected such a labyrinth of tunnels under Monte Carlo even existed. Within minutes, they were back above ground, and the taxi was stopping outside Mathieu's apartment block. Moments later, and the twins were knocking on the door of his 9th-floor apartment. To Nanette's surprise, it was Jean-Claude, Mathieu's French father, who opened the door to them. "Bonjour, mes petits, and welcome," he said, hugging the twins before turning and giving Nanette a light kiss on each cheek. She liked Jean-Claude, and they'd always got on well on the few occasions they'd met. Although, secretly, Nanette wondered how on earth he could really be Mathieu's father. Older brother, yes, but father? He simply didn't look or behave old enough. "Where's Daddy?" Olivia asked, disappointedly. "He'll be here later, ma petite," Jean-Claude said. "He has to take care of some business this afternoon. You two can take your things through to your rooms while I show Nanette hers. Lemonade and biscuits on the balcony in 10 minutes. Once the twins were safely out of earshot, Jean-Claude turned to Nanette, hesitantly. "Mathieu offers apologies, but something came up that he couldn't get out of. He hopes to be here later this evening. In the meantime, I take care of things, help you settle in, give you keys and things. I stay tonight in case he doesn't return." Jean-Claude picked up Nanette's suitcase. "You haven't been to these apartments before, have you?" Nanette shook her head. "No, Mathieu had a place up near the casino itself the last time I was here. It was a lot smaller than this one."